President Trump took some shots at Bernie recently. It's kind of sad because some of the stuff he says is true. Okay, there, I said it. I didn't want to say it. I don't want it to be the case, but some of this stuff he says is true, and it breaks my heart. So anyway, here's Trump lobbing bombs.
Because frankly, Bernie Sanders, they have much more enthusiasm for him. But Bernie Sanders, excuse me, again, he's the greatest loser I've ever seen. This guy can lose and be so happy. Hillary Clinton, I want to use nice language, so I don't want to use a certain word. It starts with the word S-C. I don't want to use it because they'll say he used foul language while in North Carolina. But so I won't do that. But Bernie Sanders got taken advantage of, is that okay? By Hillary Clinton, but worse, by the Democrats this time. Because the Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, got out of the campaign one day prior to the Super Tuesday vote. Bernie Sanders would have won every single state because Biden won by a little bit, and she didn't do well, but she took thousands and thousands of votes away in each state. If you add just a percentage of those votes back, that means that Bernie would have won easily the nomination. And I'm glad he didn't because he had much more enthusiasm. Yeah. And he would have had a base, much smaller base than ours, but equally, I have to say this, equally as enthusiastic. This base doesn't like Joe Biden. They don't like Joe Biden. Right. I think we're going to get a lot of votes. We did last time. People were surprised, primarily because of trade, because I know how other countries take advantage of us, and I understand that. And that's something that Bernie Sanders people really feel, because I understand trade.
Now, the part about trade, let's be clear about something. In Trump's first year, there was 93,000 jobs outsourced. The year before with Obama, it was 87,000. So Obama was bad and then Trump was worse. When it comes to NAFTA, he renegotiated it, but there's a giant giveaway to Big Pharma in the renegotiation of NAFTA. So it's not like the corporations are against the new trade deals. He just basically took out the old NAFTA and gave us a new NAFTA. That's also not good. Remember the whole carrier factory thing where, he act like he saved their jobs? Well, guess what? Within a year, they slowly outsourced the jobs anyway, plus they got a subsidy from the government. So taxpayers paid the company and then they outsourced the jobs anyway. So he's a fraud on that front. He's actually not good when it comes to trade. Sometimes he says good things, but in terms of his policies and his actions, just not that good. If you look at the effect of his tariffs, now I'm not anti-tariff full stop. I think in some instances they make perfect sense. But if you look at the net effect of his tariffs, there's been studies done on this, and there's been a net job loss as a result of the tariffs. So, in other words, he's failed with his approach on trade. So he brings up trade like, oh, Bernie people vote for me because I'm good on trade. And, if you care about that issue, hey, why not look over here? Nonsense. He's a fraud. Don't fall for that stuff. But listen, outside of that, almost everything else he said was true. I mean, I don't think it's true that the Trump base versus the Bernie base in a general election, Trump was making say, I'd still win and I got a bigger base, but he would have had more enthusiasm. I think Bernie definitely would have won in a head-to-head with Donald Trump. But everything else he said Bernie had more enthusiasm. True. He said the base doesn't like Joe. True. And then he was describing how, listen, if Elizabeth Warren got out before Super Tuesday, then Bernie probably would have won way more states, and then it would have been a totally different race. And I got to go a step further, too. So that's not just the case about Elizabeth Warren, where Bernie would have picked off at least like 2 or 3 more states that night. But it's also, everybody knows what Obama did. There was reporting that Obama called Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar and said, hey, listen, we're getting down to the wire here, and I'm going to need you to drop out and endorse Joe so Joe can beat Bernie. And, if you do that, there are probably promises of some sort of position in a Biden administration. So they consolidated at the last minute to screw Bernie. And then, listen, some people will look at what Bernie has done since then and argue like he's just a bigger man. Like he's just a bigger man. He's a better man. He's not petty by any stretch of the imagination, so he's doing what he thinks is right. But you got to admit that it's not that he is endorsing Biden. It's the way in which he went about it that I think is the thing that is annoying me and many other lefties. Because, there were ways to get more extractions and concessions, and he didn't do it because it would have required playing hardball, and he doesn't have that in him. So when Trump says, he's the greatest loser ever because he'll lose and he just goes right along with whatever they want, that's totally true. He lost, and there was really no inkling of seriously, here are my demands, and if you do these, I'll do X, Y, and Z for you. If you don't do these, I'm just going to sit out. He would have never done that because it was never a thought to him hey, maybe I'll just sit on the sidelines. It was never a thought to him. He wasn't willing to take that risk. So in other words, Biden knew I don't have to give him anything because if he's going to help me no matter what, why would I give him anything? Why would I give the left anything? I don't agree with the left. So yeah, unfortunately, man, broken clock is right twice a day, and a lot of the stuff that he said there was true. And, it's weird when people don't acknowledge it. Yes, you're 1,000,000% right if you say Trump is just trying to exploit this rift on the left. Absolutely. He's super selfish, super narcissistic. That's the only reason why he would go down this path and even have this conversation. But that doesn't mean that a lot of the stuff he said there isn't true. It is true. Pains me to say it. It is true. I don't think anybody who's a Bernie Sanders supporter should vote for Trump, and I can give you 1,000,001 reasons why that is. But he is a master at exploiting that rift. Just so you understand, guys, Donald Trump won 9% of Democrats in 2016. 9%. It's a high number, right? That's a high number. Now, just so you know, it wasn't actually, there weren't many Bernie Sanders supporters who flipped to Trump. There just weren't that many. The number showed that it, was a very tiny number. But there were a decent number of Democrats who voted for Trump. 9% is a decent number. So he's the master at exploiting this. This is actually one of the first times this election that I've seen him, kind of use a strategy that's actually interesting and has promise. Because up to this point, he's been trying to do Biden's far left now and controlled by Bernie, which, by the way, contradicts this, doesn't it? Bernie really runs the party and Biden is his puppet. The far left is now running the Democrats. They took over the Democrats. Well, which is it? Is it that Bernie's a loser and he got screwed and he still bent the knee to Joe? Or is he the puppet master of Joe? He tried to make both arguments at the same time, so he's contradicting himself, and that makes absolutely no sense. But needless to say, I think the strategy of what he was doing previously, far left, Marxism, communism, be afraid, all that stuff, that's got no prayer of working, which is why Joe's kind of hanging on at the moment with a pretty strong lead in the polls. Trump this time around is he doesn't have nearly as good of a strategy as he did in 2016, and that bodes well for Biden, but Trump did stumble on some truth here.